can make a way. Hey, hey, so humble yourselves and pray and guard His Torah. Obey each day. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hoshiana, Hoshiana. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I'm commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. We're really glad you're joining us today, and it's a privilege to be here, and a joy. It certainly is. The name of the message today is called A Teaspoon, a Teacup, and a Bucket. Now, during a visit to a mental institution, there was a visitor, and he asked the director, how do you determine whether or not a person should be institutionalized here? Well, said the doctor, we fill up a bathtub, and we offer the person a teaspoon and a teacup and a bucket and ask them to empty the bathtub. Oh, I see, said the visitor. A normal person would naturally pick the bucket because it's bigger than the spoon and the teacup. No, said the doctor, the normal person would pull out the plug. All right. Do you want a bed near the window? Have you ever noticed that sometimes we miss the most direct and effective solution to a problem, but because of perceived options? Yeah. Yahweh has given us the ability to think rationally, but all too often we get so caught up in the details that we overlook the real answer. Now, I'm not going to ask you which option you picked a while ago when I told this story, but do you realize that there are rational reasons why someone might pick the teaspoon or the teacup over the bucket? One person might choose the teaspoon because it would be able to do a more thorough job as you got nearer to the end of emptying the tub. Another person might pick the teacup because, well, it's more manageable than the bucket, and it seems to be a good choice between the two, you know. So, you see, you can rationalize a reason to use any one of the choices presented and fail to realize that the most direct and effective solution to the problem was what? Pull the plug. This is how Hasatan works at times. Satan. He throws out lots of things to distract us so that we lose sight of what we should really do. And then we choose what we've decided is the best option available, failing to realize that what we have chosen from is one of Satan's options. And just as with the options at the mental hospital, with our own tub of trouble, right? With our own tub of trouble, we'll rationalize in our own minds which is the appropriate option, and then make a choice that should get us committed to an insane asylum. All right, and we will miss the obvious and right choice altogether. And to make matters worse, oftentimes the answer for our dilemma has been clearly spelled out in the Scriptures already. But we take the bait and we evaluate our options and do something different than what the Scripture actually has to tell us, something that it clearly instructs. And one of the things that was clearly part of Yahshua's ministry was to add clarity to the Torah. In his day, the Torah had been so twisted and misrepresented, as it is today, that the people in many cases just did not know what the truth was. And Yahshua cleared up things. He was asked about and taught on societal problems that he perceived, from how to respect our fathers and our mothers, to knowing who is our neighbor and how to treat him, to divorce and remarrying to how to enter into life, adultery, lust, murder, and anger, etc., etc. Right? And it always leads back to the condition of our hearts. Amen? If we would only seek to find His counsel and follow His example, how much better our lives would be. So, do we always do that, or do we sometimes take the bait and choose the teaspoon, the teacup, or the bucket instead of pulling the plug? I have to admit that I am all too often guilty of trying to weigh out my options, which usually means being the electric man and taking the path of least resistance and doing whatever is the least uncomfortable. Doing whatever's the least uncomfortable, rather than reflecting long enough to ask WWYD or WDYI. That's a hard one to say. WDYI, what did Yahweh instruct? All right? Because that's what Yahshua would do. Amen? WWYD. And that's why I'm glad to be talking about this today, because I know that I need to hear it. I once gave a message on reproof called "Reproof is Not Two Witnesses." And the main text, the first one that we started with, is this. Let's turn there together. Proverbs chapter 12. Proverbs chapter 12. We're just going to read one verse. We're going to be on page 737, and I'll be reading from the 1998 ISR translation. Proverbs 12, verse 1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. If you've not heard it, I urge you to listen to it before you try what we are going to talk about today. If you love discipline, why would you love discipline? Yeah, it makes us wise. It makes us better. Amen? All right? And if you love discipline, you love knowledge. And if you hate reproof, you're stupid. You're stupid. Everybody's got that part, seems like. We got that down. It does not say if you hate the reprover's snarkiness, their arrogance, their hatefulness, their condescension, etc. It says if you hate reproof, you're stupid. You may hate the snarkiness, the arrogance, the condescension, and the hatefulness. You don't have to like it. But if you love knowledge, you need to listen to what the reprover is saying. I wish that it were not so, but sometimes the absolute truth comes from snarky, arrogant, hateful, condescending mouths. Right? And nobody said that it is easy, because we all hate to be talked down to. But if we want knowledge, then it becomes necessary at times to listen to the reproof that is not gentle. And just because you listen and evaluate, that does not mean that you agree, okay? Doesn't mean you agree with what they're saying. Just because you're told something does not mean that it is true, okay? Just because you don't like it does not mean that it's not true either. All right? Listen, I'm not talking about abuse. I want to clear that up here. Abuse where you're being reduced to someone's whipping boy. All right? That's a whole different discussion. So please don't confuse the two. I'm not talking about a situation where you're on the receiving end of a constant barrage of bullying and browbeating and belittling and put downs and name calling, etc. That's abuse, and that's not reproof, and it needs to be stopped. All right, we all got that, right? All right. I'm talking about reproof. If we're to gain discipline through knowledge, we need to welcome reproof to evaluate our own walk. But we have to get a handle on that so that we can handle this next thing. How many of us, rather than going to our brother or our sister when they offend us, go to them and reprove them so that we can be reconciled? All right? Rather than going to our brother or sister when they offend us and reprove them so we can be reconciled, we will follow our own ideas rather than dealing with the brother or the sister. All right? Do you ever say things like, I'll let that slide this time. And then you let it slide again and again and again so that resentment builds and there's never any reconciliation. Do you think things like, I just hate conflict. I can put up with this since I only see them at work or at worship or at family reunions or when they're out in the yard, etc., or things like that. Are you afraid perhaps that they will yell or they won't like you anymore? And it'll ruin your relationship. Or tell you to mind your own business. Or they'll start taking your inventory and telling you your faults so that you don't confront the situation. Why do we do this? Are we reaching for a teaspoon or a teacup or a bucket? Is it what Scripture instructs us to do? Well, does YHWH clear any of this up for us? Well, let's take a look. Now, we're not going to turn to YHWH's words first. We're going to look at Leviticus 19. While ye cry, 19. We're going to be on page 125. We're going to start reading in verse 16. I'm on page 125. Leviticus 19:16. Do not go slandering among your people, and do not stand against the blood of your neighbor. I am Yahweh. Now, before we read the next two passages, I want to take a look at this because they're right here together. But when we become offended and get our feelings hurt, there's a whole litany of emotions that we might experience, from anger, embarrassment, sadness, whatever it is. But we get our feelings hurt. When our feelings get hurt, we need to be careful. It's time to start exercising some extra discipline. Oftentimes when we get our feelings hurt, we take counsel with others. We'll pour out our heart and tell them, we tell them our own side of the story. That's what we tell them. We tell them our side of the story. Yeah, sometimes we pour out our heart. And sometimes we can POOR out our hearts. You got the difference? Sometimes we can do better at being more balanced and tell both sides of the story, but at other times we find it harder to be even-handed than at other times. It's normal to reach out to others for counsel and comfort and validation and the like, but especially at times like this, we need to be mindful of what Paul said, to take every thought captive and make it obedient unto Messiah. There can be a fine line between counsel, comfort, validation, and the like, and slander. And it's easy to get carried away at times, and I know this myself. I think that everyone has found themselves at one point or another saying too much. We can really say that we said more than we meant to. I'm sorry, I said we can't really say that we said more than we meant to. We said what we meant to, but in retrospect, more than we should have. All right. So we need to be careful not to get carried away. Leviticus 19:17. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain, and bear no sin because of him. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. This is the other side of the coin. We have to be able to take reproof, yes, but we have to be able to give it as well, and we'll see why more here in a moment. What did YHWH say? Let's see if he adds any clarity. Matthew 18. Let's see, we're going to be on page 938. Matthew 18, verse 15. And if your brother sins against you, go and reprove him between you and him alone. Okay? This is a private thing, right? YHWH is giving us some clarity. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. Well, what is a brother not? A brother is not an enemy. All right? A brother is not an enemy. It's talking about being reconciled with our brothers and sisters. So let's look at it again. If your brother sins against you, go and reprove him. This is not talking about berating him and being nasty to him. This is something that needs to be done gently and in love, because we need to be respectful to one another. Amen? What did YHWH say? Whatever you wish men to do to you, you do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. And if I want respect, I probably need to show respect. Amen? All right. Between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. Now, we're going to keep reading, but what can we learn here? All right. First of all, don't stuff this stuff. Okay? Don't stuff this stuff. Don't sit around waiting for your brother to just figure it out on his own, thinking maybe he'll see the light and straighten up. Don't bear grudges. Use gentle reproof. Going privately. Reconcile and gain your brother. And another thing I see in this is forgiveness. All right? So that we can hug one another and get back to being a family. All right? Now, I'm not so concerned about these next two steps for our study today, because we're concerning ourselves primarily with the first one. But verse 16 says, but if he does not hear you, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of two or three witnesses every word might be established. And if he refuses to hear them, say it to the assembly. And if he refuses even to hear the assembly, let him be to you like a Gentile and a tax collector. I'm mostly concerned about the first step, because a lot of stuff can be worked out in the first step, so that you never have to get those others. All right? But this swings both ways as far as YHWH is concerned. It's not just about reproving your brother. Let's turn over to Matthew chapter 5 and starting in verse 23. Page 921. Matthew 5:23. If then you bring your gift to the altar, and remember that your brother holds whatever against you. Do you see that? This is about your brother having something against you. Leave your gift there before the altar, and go first make peace with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. You see that? YHWH is saying that it's more important for you to be reconciled with your brother than bringing the gift. It's not to minimize Yahweh, but He will be waiting for us when we get back. Amen? He'll be there. But He wants you to be reconciled with your brother. Is this making sense, that this swings both ways and not just about taking reproof? Well, let's look at this. John chapter 13. John 13, page 1037. We're going to start reading in verse 34. YHWH says, a renewed command I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all shall know that you are my taught ones, if you have love for one another. Did YHWH ever reprove His taught ones? Yes, He did. Did His taught ones ever reprove Him? Yes, they did. Matter of fact, Peter reproved Yahshua on more than one occasion. One time, Yahshua told him that his thoughts were not the thoughts of Elohim, and get behind me, Satan. Another time, he washed Peter's feet. Another time he washed Peter's feet. And yet, John 15, verse 12. This is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, that one should lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all teachings which I heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he might give you. These words I command you, so that you love one another. When we reprove our brother or our sister, it should not be out of anger, but out of love and a desire for reconciliation with our brother and our sister. And also, not just to be declared right, but to be reconciled. Yahshua said to love one another as he has loved us. He loved us enough to lay down his life. If we're to love each other as he loved us, should we not at least love our brother enough to go and be reconciled? And I think the answer is yes. I'm going to have a hard time laying my life down for someone with whom I am bearing a grudge, because I haven't loved them enough to go and try to be reconciled with them in the first place. Amen? I knew after the message on reproof that I had given once upon a time, that reproof would jump up. And I wanted to be ready for it, because I don't want to be stupid. And I wanted to have knowledge. So I share this close call with you, not so I can blow my own shofar. I've fallen short much more than I like. But to show you that it works, if you work it, I want to share this. So Debbie had a conversation with someone, and they were doing some of what we're talking about here today, and managing their relationship. And while they were talking about it, and Debbie was talking about it later with me, the conversation while those two were speaking had led to something that I had said once. And Debbie said to them, "Yeah, I wish Stanley hadn't have said that either." As I walked into the other room, I thought, I wish she hadn't have said that to them. Because we do have to keep up appearances, right? Yeah. As I was walking through the house, I was thinking, I was just kidding when I said that. I was just playing around. I didn't mean anything by it. But then I did stop and think. And I said, wait just a minute, Stan. Here's an opportunity. Maybe you shouldn't have said that. So I went and I talked to her about it, and she explained just how she felt it could have been interpreted. You know, sometimes I speak before thinking. But it gave me an opportunity. To look at how this might seem uncaring to someone in that type of situation that I was making a humorous remark about, or even an innocent bystander who heard it and didn't realize that I wasn't being serious. Do you realize that the witness of a violent act is a victim of a violent act. You see, the witness of a violent act, it goes in here. They see it, they witnessed it, they were affected by it. You know, they may not have been the primary victim, but they're a victim of the violent act. And oftentimes, whether it's meant to be unkind or perceived to be unkind, the same thing can happen with a misplaced or a misdirected remark. It's because of making a conscious effort to be desirous to gain discipline and learn rather than merely react that I was able to deal with that rather than be offended. Because I can't say that I always do the right thing. Can you relate? Y'all can relate that I don't always do the right thing, huh? Okay. And and I pray, I'm just saying. And I pray that Yahweh will give me more opportunities to learn from the situations that happen in my life so that I can do better, like we were talking about earlier. We'll see where it goes from here, but hopefully it will make me a better brother and a husband and a father and an elder and an employee and a retiree and a neighbor and a friend and a poppy, etc. And hopefully, most certainly, a better son of the Father. I want to share a somewhat related story with you. Once upon a time, there were these two brothers who were left a large piece of property by their father. And for months and months, they fought about it. And they fought about how the land should be divided. Finally, they brought their problem to the minister and asked him to solve it. And he said, you two come back tomorrow. And so they came back to talk about things. And the next day, when the sons returned, the minister gave them this solution. He said, I want you to toss a coin. And then to the other brother, he said, and I want you to call heads or tails. And the one that wins the coin toss divides the property. Well, that's no solution, these brothers said to the minister. We're right back where we started from. He said, not so fast. The one who wins the toss divides the land, but the other gets first choice. I wish I could tell you that this was something that I thought of. But I do love this. I love this because it forced these two brothers to love the other as himself. Now, it's a shame they had to be forced, I mean. All right? But it created a situation where the brother had to love his brother as himself so that both were taken care of properly. I mean, it's a great story. How much conflict could we avoid if we had done this from the beginning? Amen? Amen. We're going to read two passages over again, but let's turn back to Leviticus 19. YHWH 19, page 125. And we're going to start reading in verse 17. Leviticus 19:17. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain, and bear no sin because of him. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. And the last one we're going to look at is Matthew 18. I'm going to read one verse. It's going to be on page 938. Matthew 18 and verse 15. And if your brother sins against you, go and reprove him between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. Are you messing around with a teaspoon, a teacup, or a bucket? Why not just go pull the plug, you crazy people? Yevrekeka Yahweh Ba'ishmareka Ya'er Yahweh Panavaleka Bikuneka Yasa Yahweh Panavaleka Biasem Lakash Shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you his complete contentment.
Hey, hey, and he can make a way. Hey, hey, so humble yourselves and pray and guard his Torah. Obey each day. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hoshiana, Hoshiana, hallelujah.